It's the weekend and you have financial questions that need answering. That can only mean one thing. It's time for Jill on Money, the show that takes the mystery out of your finances. Here's your host, Jill Schlesinger.
Welcome, welcome. It is the weekend, and that means it's time for Jill on Money. I'm Jill Schlesinger, and Mark and I are broadcasting from the Capital One virtual studios. Capital One, what's in your wallet? We are still virtual. Yep. Doesn't matter. Everyone's opening up. Mark and I might be the last people to actually go back into a building. Mark, I may never go back into that little studio. I know that sounds a little bit draconian, but why should I? Is there such a big difference in the sound quality? I don't think so. You guys don't notice it. Come on. If you've got a financial question, this is the program for you. If you want to listen in on our advice to others, that's fine. We'd love for you to take a seat and just chill out. But if you have a financial question, if you have an investment question, if you have a retirement question, maybe it's a tax question. Don't forget July 15th coming right around the corner. Maybe it's a question about real estate. Whatever it is, we would love to hear from you. Our email address is askjill@jillonmoney.com. That's askjill@jillonmoney.com. Okay, all right. So we had a question about somebody who had a lot of money in cash. You ready? $1.25 million in cash. That's unbelievable. That's from Christina. Some of you get very weirded out when you hear these big numbers. It's just a number. It's just, think about this, that Christina sent an email. I got a bunch of money. It's sitting in cash. That's what she wanted to know about. And I had some follow-up questions to that. That is where we are. And so here's the deal. She writes, on my money issues, I know I need to think bigger and longer term. What's my end game? The answer, I'm trying to generate about $70,000 to $75,000 a year in passive income. And I would love to get my current money to generate about $50,000 and then maybe to get to about $75,000 by the time I'm 50-ish. Okay. So she's basically says, I want to make sure I get my return of investment as well as return on investment. I don't want to lose it. There's a $1.25 million. 680,000 is in checking, savings, and taxable brokerage account. Then there's 575 that's in retirement accounts. I'm trying to shovel as much into my SEP IRA as possible. It's about $55,000 a year. Okay. Then she's got 2 houses and real estate. She makes about, ready for this, 350 grand a year. But worst case, I might take it down to, let's say, 100 grand a year on average, starting on average until I'm 50, starting next year. It's the biggest unknown. And so there is a choice to be made. I guess I'm thinking that if I could get my investments to kick out 70 to 75 grand a year safely, I can buy freedom, which is great, and take on important projects regardless of pay. I was just apropos of nothing. I was hosting a seminar for young graduates of a local university last night. And one of the things I talked about was the whole idea of saving and investing. Really, if it seems so far off to think about retirement, just think about it as freedom, that it is an opportunity fund, that when you start saving and investing early, you can do what you want later on. And I think that that's the same premise here with Christina, which is essentially, I want to do what I want to do. I don't want to have to pick something because I get paid the most, right? Okay. How do I get $50,000 a year now in passive income and get that up to $70,000 to $75,000 a year in 7 years without assuming a ton of risk? I'm leery of financial planners, but if you've got a recommendation, I would take that. I wonder what your end game is. Why are you doing all this? Let me know if I can ever be of help to you. That was nice. Okay. Whew. Mark, I know you don't like to hear when 50-year-olds talk about retirement. I don't either. But it's a little different here. We're not talking about full-on retirement. We are talking about essentially semi-retirement. So, how do you achieve that? Well, first of all, let's just look at that 1.25 million, right? That 1.25 million. I would say that if you are a low risk investor and you want to know what you can generate from that, it is not $50,000 a year. You can't do it. The back of the envelope calculation of how to generate money would lead me to say maybe a 3% withdrawal rate. Not that you're withdrawing anything from that, but I'm just saying that right now I wouldn't be counting on 50 grand a year. I would make it more like 37.5 a year. That's what I would be thinking out. And then if you put more money away, then of course you can get there. But to generate, I mean, the 75,000 is a big bogey to get there. And so what do you really need to accumulate to get your magic, say 75 grand a year? It's probably close to 3 million bucks. Here's how I figure that. Let's say you accumulated between these two accounts $3 million. That $3 million would generate withdrawal if you apply a 3% withdrawal rate to it. So you just multiply it by 0.03%. That gives you 90 grand. And the reason I chose a larger number is you're going to have to pay some taxes. That's kind of where you need to be. So in many respects, while 1.25 million seems like a ton of money because it is, I really think that you should be aiming to get to closer to 3 million. Now, this does not account for the fact that you will likely receive some social security, but if you just tell me you want to try to get 70 to 75 grand in passive income in 7 years, and you said without assuming a quote ton of risk, then I think you got more saving to do. And I think that you may have to readjust what you believe is your game plan to maybe fine tune this a little bit. Maybe you would say, okay, you know what? It's not going to be 7 years. It's not going to be at age 50. It's really going to be at age 55. I'm not sure what the numbers are, but what in terms of your own hopes, dreams, desires, but the more money you can put away now, the more opportunities you will have. Check. I'm on that. Yes, you need to accumulate a lot of money to generate 50 or even $75,000 a year in passive income. My concern is that you really need about 3 million bucks, and it's not so easy to do this without a ton of risk. I don't know what that really means, but even as a balanced investor, that's going to be hard for you to do unless you keep making as much as you're making and saving as much as you're making. I think that it's doable, but you got to save a lot of money and you've got to refrain from pulling a lot of money out of where you are right now. If you really want to talk more about this, I'm happy to do so offline. I really think it's a great game plan. And everyone listening, the game plan is not, I got to get out when I'm 50. It's, I've got to give myself more options and opportunities. And the reason that you want options and opportunities is that you want more control over your financial life and your work life. That's what saving and investing does. It provides you with opportunity. Okay, we're going to head to a break. If you need help with options and opportunities, just send us an email. It's askjill@jillonmoney.com. During this break, why don't you hop onto the website, jillonmoney.com, and there you can sign up for our free weekly newsletter. We'll be right back.
Welcome back to Jill on Money, where Jill Schlesinger takes the mystery out of your finances.
You're back. It's Jill on Money. We are delighted that you have joined us. Fantastic that you have. And, I know that there's a lot of questions that we've been dealing with around our investments. And certainly, if anything is more proof that market timing does not work, perhaps the last 4 or 5 months is the best illustration of that. I wish we should have just time-stamped and saved every single email that we got in the month of March where people were freaking out and wanting to have the best advice as to what they should do because they were cashing out. I mean, it is amazing. Nobody asked us about cashing out in February when the stock market indexes were all hitting new highs. But miraculously, when they were hitting lows and bear market lows, that's when we heard from you. Okay, some of you did want to invest, but it was a scary time. From that March 23rd low, 50 days, we saw the S&P 500 go up about 40%. I don't know if it's going to stay, the markets are going to stay higher, but I can just tell you this. The last few months is a wonderful lesson in not trying to time the market. It is about having a game plan, sticking to that game plan, not messing around with it when the market goes up, down, up, down. Don't do that. Create the plan that can see you through. We would like to help you create that plan. So if you have any sort of questions around your investments, feel free to email us, askjill@jillonmoney.com. Now, many of you know that we have a sister podcast, okay? It is called Jill on Money. When you write and I need more information, you know that I always say that on the radio show as well. Well, I did that with somebody named Dawn who wrote to us, and she was asking about target date retirement funds, and I asked for more information. So here's her follow up, which is hysterical. Hi, Jill and Mark. The thud you recently heard was my jaw dropping in surprise when I heard you addressing my question on a recent podcast and asking for additional information to make the response more specific to me. Wow, talk about exceeding expectations. Oh, that's so nice. Okay. So here's more about Dawn. She writes, I am 61 years old, single, no children. I retired earlier than expected to become the primary caregiver for an elderly parent. Okay. I'd classify my investment philosophy via the acronym KISS. Keep it simple, stupid. I love that. I'm all about that, Dawn. Well done. Current fair market value of my house is $325,000. No mortgage, no other debts. I receive a monthly pension of $2,000. No guarantee of increase, but it will not go lower than this amount for the rest of my life. I plan to claim my Social Security benefit at age 70. Here's my expenses, $3,000 a month. Not bad. Between checking and savings, I've got 2 years of supplemental income. I have a CD that will mature in 2022 that will be the cash payment for my next car. Here are the investments. Okay, here we go. Rollover IRA from previous job, current value $30,000, invested in the Vanguard Target Retirement 2025 fund. Okay, that seems reasonable. And Dawn has been converting this money into a Roth account, usually just to the top of whatever bracket she's in for the year. Currently, that's 12%. She says, I expect that the conversion of the entire account will be complete within the next 2 to 3 years. Okay, perfect. That's fine. Okay, so now what's in the Roth? The Vanguard Balanced Index Fund. And then there are two retirement accounts. One is a pre-tax retirement account, $460,000 in the Vanguard Target Retirement 2015. Then there is a post-tax, a Roth retirement account. It's got 50 grand in it, same Vanguard Target Retirement 2015. My question to you is prompted by trying to decide what to do about the 457 accounts, these two retirement accounts. Okay. The fund choices are limited. While investment costs are low, trying to withdraw the money is more difficult. Massive paperwork, limited flexibility, and they charge a fee for each withdrawal. Okay, well, this is going to be completely easy. Thank you very much. Let's see. Initial thoughts were to move the 457 Roth into the Vanguard Roth, since conversions in the 457 are possible but difficult. Okay, I love that idea. That's perfect. Let's do that. Next, also, I would consider moving a portion of the 457 pre-tax into the Vanguard Target Retirement 2025 and continue conversions from there into the Vanguard Roth. However, I wasn't sure about being the right fund mix for a retirement situation. I'm unsure about having all the money at one company and whether that's a good idea. Any thoughts are appreciated. I think I would be in a better position now if the podcast had been available 30 years ago. Oh, that's a very nice thing to write. Okay, big picture. First of all, you're in great financial shape, right? Because you already have $2,000 a month in pension income. You will get that Social Security. So essentially, we're just looking at the next 9 years between now and the time you claim your Social Security and how much money you would need to be pulling from these accounts. So here's what I think you ought to do. I love the idea of slowly converting the rollover to a Roth. That's number one. Number two, I think easiest thing for you to do right now is to take the 457 Roth, move that into the Roth IRA. You could do that right now. Don't even sweat it. Easy peasy. And then you could actually even take the 457 and roll that into the current rollover IRA. Just put it all together. Now you'll end up with two accounts, right? Your rollover account, which will now have the $30,000 that's there, plus you'll have about $500,000 in the rollover account. And again, you can slowly convert it. You don't have to go crazy, right? Like do it a little bit at a time. And then in your Roth account, you'll have about $250,000. Okay. And that's fantastic. All that you need to really consider is whether it is the right investment to have a target retirement account or whether you should just do this yourself. Now, Vanguard is a wonderful company. You can feel free to have one company for that chunk of money. If you really don't like any risk at all, because it seems like you don't, then having these target retirement funds with lower levels of stock allocations can make sense. You're not really in a huge situation where you have to worry about the growth of these accounts. The good news is that in your case, that you can be a slow and steady and make it work. Alternatively, what you could do is, since you are in the Vanguard environment, you could say, I'm just going to put 20% in a Vanguard US stock index fund, 10% in a Vanguard international stock index fund, and 70% in a Vanguard investment grade bond fund, and call it a day. But you're also okay sticking with those retirement target date funds. You are not in any perilous situation. You're not going to make a mistake. Consolidation makes sense. Slow conversions where you're staying in the 12% tax bracket also makes sense. You may not even convert all of that money. It's okay, because when you turn 72, that's when you'll start taking money out of that tax deferred account. And so, big deal. You'll pay your required minimum distribution. That's fine. You can even use that to supplement what you live on. Fine, no problem. There's actually no issues here. You're in great shape. If you need more help beyond this, feel free to follow up. Third time's a charm, right? And thanks so much for the follow-up. It's great. I'm really happy. This is such a good situation that it's always nice to have these kinds of conversations. Okay, you are listening to Jill on Money. During the break, go to our website. It's called jillonmoney.com. And there, check out that podcast of ours. It's called Jill on Money. By the way, you can get it on Apple, Stitcher, Spotify, radio.com, Google Play, wherever you find your favorite podcast. Jill on Money. All Jill, all the time, 7 days a week. That's what you would get by subscribing. Check it out. Okay, we'll be right back.
Follow Jill on Twitter and Instagram for more personal finance content. Just use the handle @JillOnMoney. Now, back to the show.
You're back. It's Jill on Money. This is the program that tries to take the mystery out of your financial life. If you have a question, maybe it is about your taxes, which you have not yet paid. The IRS says they have far fewer tax returns than they did at last time this year. They also say that many people obviously were taking right up to that July 15th deadline. So if you've got a tax question, we'd love to hear from you. Don't forget, you don't need to take your required minimum distributions this year. You don't have to do that. No RMDs in the year 2020. So you can just let that money sit around, and you're not even going to have to do a double next year, just as if 2020 didn't exist, which is, I think, probably how many people wish this year were, as if it just didn't exist because it's been a very rough year. If you need some help with other parts of your financial life, I'm happy to chime in. Maybe it's an insurance question. Just give us a holler. You can email us, ask Jill at jillonmoney.com. That's ask Jill at jillonmoney.com. Okay. Beverly writes that I'm 58. My husband is 59. We live outside Boston. We both work. He earns $140,000. I earn about $70,000. Our jobs are okay thus far. Of course, that could change. We plan to work until ages 65 to 67. We have a home and about $165,000 remaining on the mortgage. The house is worth $550,000 to $575,000. Two kids, one entering senior year of college, one entering freshman year this fall, we hope. Education funds are in place, so no debt there. That's great. Wow. Okay, Beverly says, big question. We have our money invested with Bernstein in a moderate growth position, 40% bonds, 56% stock. We were told that the benefit of our working with them was that they are research based and that although gains might lag during boom times, losses would also lag when there would be a bust. Here's the issue. We are not seeing that bear out, unfortunately. Okay, so let's see what we got. We got a lot of money here. So Beverly says they have on January 1st, they had, let's just call it 2.5 million bucks. Okay. That's the valuation of the portfolio. And then on June 1st, 2.25 million. Okay. We lost a little bit of money. That doesn't seem bad. The management fee was around $6,000. That's cheap. Okay. We have also inherited $700,000 cash from a life insurance policy. It's in the bank, it's earning no interest, but it's there. Okay, so now here's the question. I've been thinking it could be time to leave Bernstein. We have been pitched by First Republic as a trusted friend who just moved his portfolio over from Bernstein to First Republic, and he has been happy with their plan. I guess we could jump ship and follow, but I would appreciate having a better understanding of what other options are out there. We're not roller coaster types. We do want to preserve our capital, and we are able to live on these investments and leave some behind for the boys. Thank you for your time and your consideration. Okay. I don't think this is such a big deal loss-wise. I don't think if I look at the first 5 months of the year and, that year to date, if we consider that, essentially 40% bonds, 56% stocks, I'm presuming the rest is in cash, that I don't think that loss is bad. I really don't. I could be missing something, but I don't. I think that if I looked at the S&P 500 from January 1st to May 31st, it was down. It was still down, okay? And it was probably down, I think it was a few percentage points on the year. And so the bond should have increased. The stock position is down a little bit. I mean, I guess we'd have to look at really what's in there. I get the other part of this is that I am just that whole research based blah, blah, blah. I think it's baloney. I mean, I think that Bernstein's a good house. It's interesting. But really, what I'm most not concerned with, but I would guess that my big red flag here is that you have lost confidence. And in that case, I wonder why. This is not a terrible loss. If you really were looking, if I think that the loss is a sustainable loss, but if you feel like you've lost confidence in these folks, then maybe you have to leave. And if that's the case, then you should be shopping around. I would absolutely, positively go talk to the people at First Republic. I would also talk to some other people. And I'm happy to follow up with you and send you a couple of names. I'm happy to do that as just a not a money manager, but a financial planner. Especially because you've got this other money that's in cash. I mean, you're going to have 3 million bucks. You probably are not going to need all this money for the rest of your life. You're in great shape. You want to feel like you're being taken care of. You want to feel like you have a game plan, and you want to feel like someone's executing the game plan. I think the whole idea of the focus on the portfolio is a little bit of a distraction. What is it that really is important to you and your family, and how you're going to achieve that? That really means you need to be talking to somebody who has a broader approach than just the investments. So that's my 2 cents. I think you're in great shape. I wouldn't just run out and move the money, but I think conducting an interview and getting an opinion about what's going on in your financial life, that's completely worth doing and recommended. So here's what I'm going to do. Mark's going to send you a clip of this, and then I'm going to send you a couple of names for you in addition to your First Republic, just knowing where you're located. And hopefully that will help you out. And if it does not help you and you feel more confused, you can follow up and ask an additional question. But you're in really good shape. So it sounds like you guys have done a terrific job in saving and investing and securing your financial future. So well done. And we'll follow up with you. We'll just do that just cause. Okay. All right. We're going to go to a break. During the break, go to the website, jillonmoney.com. You can read columns that I've written. You can listen to old shows. You can watch my TV appearances. And not only that, you can buy my book, The Dumb Things Smart People Do With Their Money, 13 Ways to Right Your Financial Wrongs. We'll be right back.
If you've missed any part of a show or want to check out a past show, go to jillonmoney.com for more great personal finance content.
You're back. It's Jill on Money. If you've got a financial question, we'd love to hear from you. Ask Jill at jillonmoney.com is our email address. By the way, I did mention this in the previous segment. I just want to do this again because we haven't talked about it in a while. Required minimum distributions are waived for 2020. But someone actually did ask me in my life, also known as my mother, what happens for next year? Remember? And next year, you just keep doing it. You do it as if 2020 never existed. So that's really important to remember. If you took an RMD this year, it can be undone if you're eligible to have it rolled over. So there's some ways to do that. And also want to remind everybody that your deadlines for filing your taxes, July 15th, that's your tax return filing date. IRA and Roth IRA contributions for calendar year 2019, for tax year 2019, that's July 15th. HSA contributions, July 15th. Coverdell Education Savings Account contributions, July 15th. So did you get that? July 15th. That's your big day. And if you have to make quarterly estimates for both first and second quarter, July 15th. Get ready to get your checkbooks out if you got to get those estimates going, right? Time to get going, right? Good. Okay. Here we go. Janet writes, my husband and I are 83 and we're in good shape. Good deal. We have a 5-year annuity, and August will be the 5th year. We will be receiving approximately $350,000. The money has to be liquid. What should we do with it? We've got money in the bank, and we get, about 2 cups of coffee a month in interest. We also have 3 IRAs, which give us required minimum distributions throughout the year. We live on our retirement money coming in. Plus, we've got Social Security. We realize we're old, but we're doing very well. That's hysterical. We never thought about age until COVID came along. Obviously, we are in the upper bracket for that age. My husband reads the paper every day with his coffee. It is his enjoyment. He gave me your email this morning, asked if I would send a question for you. He doesn't do this computer thing. Thanks, Janet. I love this question so much. Okay. So if you're sitting on cash and you want it to remain in cash, the best the best thing I can suggest to you is to use a resource that Mark and I have been using for a long time called depositaccounts.com. Depositaccounts.com is an aggregation website. It allows you to see what the interest rates are among banks and credit unions and online savings and checkings and money markets, all that stuff. And one thing to consider is that, you all you need to do is you want to keep this safe, right? So one thing to consider is that $350,000 is more than 250,000 of your FDIC insurance. So if you really want to be safe about it, you would not put all of this 350 in one institution, but maybe split it up. Well, that's fine. You might even go and look at a couple of CDs. I'm just going to randomly click on a 3-year CD just for the heck of it. What does it show me? It shows me that I can get a CD through different credit unions, probably some other bigger places. You get about 1.5 to 1.8%. But then I look at, say, savings and money market accounts, and I look at jumbo money market accounts. And there I look at these online banks that are paying 1.5%. That seems pretty good. I think that sounds darn good. And, our sponsor, by the way, which is one of our sponsors for this show, is Capital One. They have a ton of things that are on their website. Marcus, a Goldman Sachs bank, has a good offer. So you can go look around and see what's available to you. Again, there's no reason that you have to go crazy here. You could put a little bit of money in, say, a 3-year and maybe some in a 2-year CD, or you can just search online for a jumbo high yielding money market account. But you don't want to take risk with it. As you said, you want to keep it nice and simple. And nice and simple kind of, I do believe that is probably your best bet right now. Why go crazy? You know? And if you happen to be in an area where you could potentially tap into a credit union, that also may be something to look at. Well, interest rates are low. The Federal Reserve is leaving them at zero for a while. You're not going to get great interest. So maybe what you try to do is just scale in, put some of the money in a slightly longer CD, a 2 or maybe a 3-year, maybe do a 3-year, a 2-year, a 1-year, and then some money market and call it a day and not worry too much. Again, the name of that website is depositaccounts.com. You can also do bankrate.com. They got a lot of different availability there, but poke around. I know you said your husband doesn't do the old computer thing, but you know what? A little bit of searching, just a little bit, will help you increase the amount of interest that you earn. Even though you don't need all of this money at once, it's nice to feel like you're getting a little bit of money and interest, a little bit of a return on that investment. So go check that out. And if you've got follow-up questions, feel free to let us know. And thanks again for writing in. Okay. During the break, here's an idea. You can actually go to yourself. You can go over to depositaccounts.com and check out whether you should be trying to improve the amount of money you receive on your safe emergency reserve fund. So go check it out. All right. If you've got a financial question, ask Jill at jillonmoney.com. We'll be right back. You're back. It's Jill on Money. We are broadcasting from the Capital One Bank virtual studios. Capital One, what's in your wallet? If you have a financial question, we'd love to hear from you. Our email address is askjill Jill at JillOnMoney.com. Ask Jill at JillOnMoney.com. Okay, this is from Wendy, whose subject is being smart about my retirement. Okay, here's what she says. Thanks for such good advice. I love seeing you on CBS and listening to you on the radio show. My husband and I are planning on retiring in 7 years. He will be 65, I will be 63. Between the two of us, we make around $200,000. We've got a portfolio with our financial planner of approximately $1.2 million. Our home will be paid for in 6 years. We also have a lake house, and that's paid for. We visit that most weekends. Our plan is to rent out our home in the city and retire at the lake house. My biggest concern is the market at this time and the volatility, recession, COVID, unemployment. Speaking with my financial planner, he says he can double our money in about 10 years or better. We're in American funds. Our other option is taking half of it out, putting it into an annuity. Payout would be in 7 years, 40 grand a year guaranteed. Between that and our Social Security, we'd be fine. We'd still have extra money from that was in the market. My question, stay in the market, take half and put in an annuity. I'm torn. We plan on buying an RV and traveling after retirement, so want to have some fun money. I think no to the annuity, but I'm a little concerned that maybe your advisor is promising more than you can actually get. It may be that you could get doubling your money, but what I'd rather you do is say to your advisor, we need you to take a conservative approach. Don't worry about doubling our money. Worry about generating the amount of money we need to enjoy our retirement. Give him or her that direction. And then let's see where you land. If it doesn't make sense, please feel free to give us a holler. It's Jill on Money. Coming up next hour, we have something really fun, a replay of a great interview with a friend of mine, Cathy O'Neil, author of Weapons of Math Destruction. Get it? Math. Cool. All right, we'll be right back.
It's the weekend, and that can only mean one thing. You're listening to Jill on Money, the show that takes the mystery out of your finances. Here's your host, Jill Schlesinger.
You're back. It is hour number 2 of the Jill on Money show, and we are broadcasting from the Policy Genius virtual studios. Policy Genius is the easy way to compare and buy insurance. Just go to policygenius.com. Well, we have been trying to comb through our archive, and an interview that we had conducted a few years ago was with one of my favorite interviewees, probably like my top 5 guests of all time, which is amazing, right? And we think it's especially relevant to these times. The guest is Cathy O'Neil. Cathy had written a book called Weapons of Math Destruction. Get it? Math Destruction. And the subtitle of that book, How Big Data Increases Inequality and Threatens Democracy. And I met Cathy, fell in love with her immediately, and have maintained a relationship with her to this day. That relationship has really helped me understand how sometimes inequality can be driven through a reliance on algorithms. So we thought it would be really important during these times of protests and lots of conversations about income inequality, especially between the races, not to mention between genders, that we bring Cathy's interview back to you. So in our show notes, we will make sure that we have a link to the book, Weapons of Math Destruction. Here is the first part of our interview with Cathy O'Neil. What is the best financial decision or career decision or money decision that you've ever made in your life?
Taking all my money out of the stock market.
Really? When did you do that?
I mean, not at the worst time, but not at a great time, but it just freed me. I just don't think about it anymore.
So you're not invested right now at all?
Not at all.
Why? It just freaked you out too much?
It distracted me, to be honest.
Wow.
And the truth is, like, I mean, maybe I'm bragging here, but like,
yeah, you should.
My job is to think. And if I spend my time worrying about the market, I'm not making money thinking. And like, I actually make more money thinking than I would by investing. It's not like I have a lot of money, by the way.
Oh, yeah. We'll look at your balance sheet after. All right, I like that idea because I do like the idea that it can drive you crazy.
It can drive you crazy. I'll tell you what, like, I've spent a lot of time with very poor people and with very rich people. And the people who worry the most about money are people at the extremes. The people who are in the middle, who are like, I have enough money not to worry about it, but I don't have enough money to worry about it.
There was like an interesting survey about money and happiness, and I think that there was like a sweet spot where they said sort of like $75,000 to $100,000 a year in income was like where they found the happiest people. Because again, I've got my shelter, I've got this. I don't have so much money where I have to really start like freaking out because I'm not going to save a ton of money for my kids' college, and I'm going to just plod along and do my job. But you know, that goes against my mother's theory, which is rich or poor, it's nice to have money.
Dude, I'm probably going to regret this. I'm probably going to be like, I'm such an idiot. The market is so high. I mean, I should probably already feel that way, but instead I just feel like I don't even have to worry about it.
Cathy O'Neil, New York Times bestseller, Weapons of Math Destruction, How Big Data Increases Inequality and Threatens Democracy. So, Cathy, you are a data scientist. You're a math nerd,
yeah,
right?
I am, sure.
Why'd you write this book?
Well, I wrote the book because after my experiences as a quant in finance, because I worked at a hedge fund with Larry Summers, like during the crisis, I left finance sort of disgusted with the way that mathematics was being used and abused. You remember the mortgage-backed securities and the AAA ratings? Well, those AAA ratings were a mathematical lie. And it really upset me that mathematics was the sort of trust in mathematics was being abused. And so many people trusted those AAA ratings. And internationally, people invested in them. And it really screwed up the economy because of an underlying mathematical lie. And I know that's not the whole story. There's a lot of corruption going on. A lot of people should have gone to jail. They didn't. But there was at its heart this sort of dishonesty. And it made me realize that mathematical algorithms, when they're being misrepresented, can really have devastating consequences.
Let's back up a second because, okay, I'm a little bit of a math nerd.
Oh, awesome.
So let's go back for the people who are absolutely freaked out by the word math right now who are listening. And let's talk about what is an algorithm and how they can process that and what's the difference between a good algorithm and a bad one.
I'm glad we're doing that because like one of my most important points is like you don't need to be a math nerd to understand the kind of corruption and failure I'm talking about. So an algorithm for me is something we actually do in our heads on a daily basis. It's using sort of past information, past data to predict something. So for example, I like to use the following example. Look, I make dinner for my family. I have 3 sons and a husband. And I like to make a dinner that would be successful, right? Mm-hmm. And so what is the information I have? Well, how did past dinners go? What did people eat? What did people not eat? How well cooked should this be if I want to get people to eat it, et cetera, like that. So the data coming in is all the past dinners, but also the actual ingredients I have in my kitchen. And I should say that I don't include all the ingredients. And this is already part of how I'm embedding my agenda into that model. So I don't include ramen noodles. That my 17-year-old loves ramen noodles, but I'm like, that's not really food to me, right? I don't consider Jell-O for the most dinners, right? I'm not saying there will be no dinner where I'd have Jell-O, but on an average night, I'm like, no, that's not part of dinner. So I curate my data. And this is one of the most important things, that people always curate the data. They decide what's relevant. And that's a very subjective choice. And then I make the dinner, blah, blah, blah. I sit down with my family, we eat. Then afterwards, I look at the dinner and I say, was this successful or not?
You get the feedback, probably in real time.
Yes, except the very important point is that I'm in charge, so I get to decide what success looks like. So I define success to be my kids ate enough and they ate their vegetables.
Okay.
Jose,
you're that kind of mother.
Because I'm that kind of bitchy mother, yeah. The point being that if my 8-year-old were in charge, the definition of success would be, did I get to eat Nutella? Because that's all he cares about, literally. So The point I'm trying to make, though, is that the definition of success matters crucially because I will make the next meal depending on whether this meal was successful. I'll make the next meal like this meal in some way, right? And if I had chosen the Nutella definition of success, it would be a very different sequence of meals. But I'm in charge.
And you get to make that determination. You get to filter what comes back at you in terms of the feedback.
Exactly. I get to decide what's important, what's not, what a failure looks like, how much to penalize myself for a failure, etc. So going back to finance, the AAA-rated mortgage-backed security credit ratings, they decided what kind of data to use. They didn't have any of the relevant data, so they just used old data that looked good. It was the wrong thing to do, but their definition of success wasn't that AAA-rated mortgage-backed securities never defaulted. Their definition of success was they got more market share. They got paid.
Right. We got paid by the client. They sold more of this stuff. It's highly unlikely that this whole series of events would be... I don't even know if they thought about the downside when they were doing it.
I don't think they did. I think they literally were just so greedy and dishonest that they were like, oh, well, it's working as long as the machine keeps turning.
We'll get back to Cathy O'Neil in just a minute. Hey, during the break, hop onto the website, JillOnMoney.com, and there you can sign up for our free weekly newsletter so you don't miss any of the big stories of the week. Okay, we'll be right back.
Welcome back to Jill on Money, where Jill Schlesinger takes the mystery out of your finances.
You're back. It's Jill on Money, and we are here to take the mystery out of your financial life, but we're also here to provide you with timely guests and ways to understand what's going on in the news cycle. So we are rebroadcasting parts of our interview that we conducted with Cathy O'Neil a few years back. Cathy is the author of the book Weapons of Math Destruction. She has really helped me understand the way that we can rely on numbers, but that those numbers can betray us. We saw that probably in the most sort of a vibrant way with the Great Recession and the financial crisis. So in this segment, Cathy will describe how our reliance on these formulae were really used in a way that was so destructive. So here is more of our interview with Cathy O'Neil.
The thing that freaked me out about that period of time as someone who kind of digs statistics and like old-time options traders, that I would talk to people on Wall Street. So, I was still managing money then, and I would talk to some people I knew that were like institutional people, and I would say things like, but I don't understand, and fill in the blank. It would just be a normal question.
Right.
Like, well, what happens if, well, that's not going to happen. It's never happened before. But a lot of things that have never happened before happen. So have you modeled that? And they would, I think maybe they were more of the salespeople or the trader types who would say, but the guys in the quants tell us everything's fine. So they relied on math to make themselves feel better. But did they ever ask those questions, or were they so blinded by the money?
I think it's a little of both, but I'll say as one of those quants, because that's what I did, like I asked stupid questions too, and the other quants were like, don't ask stupid questions.
Oh, really?
But you're absolutely right, and I think that's a very important point, which is that a lot of this belief system, which it really was a belief system, was propped up by the underlying authority of mathematics. And that's what I left finance thinking, that's nasty. Like I'm a believer in mathematics. Mathematics is powerful and beautiful and true. This isn't mathematics. This is something else. This is marketing or something along those lines. And it is actually obscuring truth rather than clarifying.
Tell me an example of a good algorithm that's like, oh my God, that works. Tell me the beauty of math. Get people psyched about an algorithm that works that you think is like, oh man, that's awesome.
I think my favorite use of math and prediction is probably from sports. I mean, I just think it's really cool to come up with different ways of measuring sports players and like how are they valuable to the team? How do they contribute to a win? Because it's important to know that there's very specialized. Sports is very specialized in a few ways. First of all, it's very clear what you're going for, and that's winning. Remember we were talking about like the definition of success for cooking?
Right.
In this realm, it's pretty clear what you're going for. You want your team to win. And maybe it's actually, you should think you wanted to win the World Series if you're in baseball instead of winning a specific game. But it's pretty much the same thing on a daily basis. The second thing that's really special about sports, besides that it's really fun and entertaining, is that you get feedback. And this is something, after I left finance and went to data science, I saw a problematic series of algorithms that don't get this critical feedback. In other words, in sports, if you have underestimated the potential of a player and you don't pick him up on your team and it goes to another team, then you'll see you made a mistake.
Right, because that feedback is continuing whether or not that person's with you or not. And in baseball, you have 162 games, so it's even better than football, which is 16 games.
Right. Baseball is obviously my favorite sport.
So a good algorithm, a good use of algorithms, sports.
Yes.
Now let's talk
Here's
about...
another one.
Yeah.
Amazon. Does an amazing, amazing job. And again, it's about a feedback loop, right?
Huge numbers, right? And you get that information constantly.
And they say, oh, you're the type of person who might like baby rattles, and they'll show me a product and I'm like, I don't want that. And they'll show not just to me, but to people like me, and it doesn't work. And guess what the machine does? It says, that didn't work. Let's not do that anymore. And so instead they show me stuff that I actually want. And by the way, I'm not saying like Amazon's my favorite company, because I'm actually really scared of Amazon taking over the world and having an enormous amount of power. But I do want to say they do big data really well.
What about Netflix?
Netflix I like.
That's pretty interesting, right?
It's interesting. I love the technical details of recommendation engines. It's really fun. I mean, it's not perfect because think about it, like some populations watch way more movies and they rate more movies. And that information means because they are overrepresented, that means but recommendation engine is going to work a lot better for them than for me. And when I say them, I'm talking about my teenage sons.
Of course.
So the recommendation engine is tilted towards people who use it more. But that kind of makes sense.
Yeah, I guess.
But it means that they know me less. And by the way, I don't hate algorithms. I worry about algorithms that are potentially very harmful. And the thing you can say about Netflix is the worst harm that can come to you is that you watch a movie you don't like. It's just not that big a deal.
Right. So let's talk about the scary ones. And you start the book with a few of them. So I love this part where you say there will always be mistakes, because models are, by their very nature, simplifications. No model can include all of the real world's complexity or the nuance of human communication. To create a model, then, we make choices about what's important enough to include, simplifying the world into a toy version that can be easily understood and from which we can infer important facts and actions. Now, what struck me about that is when you're trying to model something with variables that aren't exactly measurable, right? The qualitative, not the quantitative, that seems to me where you run into some of the biggest problems. So can you talk a little bit about the teacher evaluations, which is the one that just jumps out and is horrifying to me?
It is horrifying. And by the way, it's still being used.
Yeah, I know.
So the idea is hold teachers accountable. Well, if you're going to hold teachers accountable, if you're going to get rid of bad teachers, you're going to have to define which teachers are bad. So if you think about it, like what makes a teacher a good teacher? And the answer that they came up with was, let's just look at test scores. Now, you and I both know that a good teacher isn't defined by their test scores. It's defined by whether they inspire or whether they include everyone or making sure they don't shame anyone. There's all sorts of ways you could be a good or a bad teacher. Test scores is the only information they really take in about a given teacher.
Is that because it's the only quantitative data that you can grab? Is that why
easiest?
It's the easiest?
It's easiest.
Right.
I think it's just literally like, let's close our eyes and hope this works type of stuff. And it doesn't work because what they've come up with is almost a random number generator. For each student in a person's class, so if you have 30 students, you have 30 kids, each of them comes in at the beginning of your fourth grade year with an expected end of year score on their standardized tests. It's based partly on their end of third grade score. Also, which class they're in, which teacher they have, which school they're in, which school system they're in, how many kids are in the class, how many kids qualify for a free school lunch, which is a proxy for poverty. Complicated formula, but essentially what they're expected to get at the end of the year. And it's not a very good model. It's not very accurate. Imagine you trying to figure out, just knowing what a kid got at the end of the school year and looking around the school, like trying to figure out what they're going to get at the end of next year. in a year. That's hard to predict. And indeed, it's pretty uncertain. And then they compare, for your 30 students, they all come up with the expected score. They compare it with the actual scores your kids get. So if somebody was expected to get a 50, but they got a 60, you'd been give credit for that. So you get credit or you're penalized for the difference between their actual and expected scores. So if you raised everyone's score 10 points above expected, then you would obviously be a magnificent teacher. That's typically not what happens. But also, very importantly, the idea is that only you and only you are responsible for the difference between these two numbers. But actually, these two numbers are extremely uncertain. You would think your actual score of an actual kid would be just a number. But think about it. If you took it on a different day, or if you got less sleep that day, or if it was a hot day and you didn't have air conditioning, or you did have air conditioning, lots of different variables, or you had it after lunch and you didn't eat lunch, lots of variables could just change the actual score a kid gets in a given test. Or the test itself could be harder that year than expected, which happens all the time. So you have two numbers. You're taking the difference. They're both uncertain. The difference is actually more uncertain. And the end result is that teachers are being scored on sort of the average of 30 very random numbers. And that means that the teacher scores themselves are almost random.
We'll get back to our interview with Cathy O'Neil in just a second. You're listening to Jill on Money. Don't forget, you can subscribe to our sister broadcast. It is a podcast. It is called Jill on Money. And you can get it on Apple, Stitcher, Spotify, radio.com, Google Play, or wherever you find your favorite podcasts. We'll be right back.
Follow Jill on Twitter and Instagram for more personal finance content. Just use the handle @JillOnMoney. Now, back to the show.
You're back. It's Jill on Money, and we are continuing our interview with Cathy O'Neil. Again, this was recorded a few years ago, but boy, you'll see it, you'll hear it rather in this segment. It is incredibly prescient that Cathy O'Neil, a mathematician, was talking about how the use of algorithms, basically a mathematical formula, could really distort the process, whether it's a teacher evaluation, policing. Certainly, it is an incredibly timely bit of expertise to drop in your lap today. So here is more of our interview with Cathy O'Neil.
There is a story in the book that you tell of one New York City school teacher where one year, I think it was like a 6 and the other was 90 or something.
96. Yes.
What?
I know. And he didn't change the way he taught. I mean, his conclusion, which was appropriate, was this system doesn't make any sense.
Oh, my God.
He was allowed to make that because he already had tenure, and this wasn't about getting fired. Whereas Sarah Wysocki, who I profiled at the beginning of the book, did get fired. She got fired based on her overall teacher assessment, 50% of which was her value-added model score. This is what I've been describing, the value-added model, which was extremely bad. And she thought about it, and she said, a lot of the kids that were in my 4th grade class had gotten really high scores at the end of 3rd grade, but came in and didn't know how to read or write. Okay, that's very strange, right? And it was under Michelle Rhee as superintendent in Washington, D.C.
The now disgraced.
Yes, I would say. She not only fired people like Sarah for getting bad scores, she also gave bonuses for really good scores.
So people fudge their numbers.
I mean, there were certainly incentives. And the school that those kids came from, they had an unusual number of erasures, but nobody really investigated. So at least Sarah had plenty of evidence to suspect that her score was being artificially deflated by previous cheating. Because think about it. If teachers had cheated on those tests, they came in with inflated expected scores, and Sarah couldn't possibly make up the difference, right? She tried to appeal her score, but she was told that the process was fair based on it being a mathematical algorithm.
But they didn't open that up. It wasn't a transparent model.
It wasn't at all transparent. And I'm going to just come to the definition for me of a weapon of math destruction, which is a powerful, highly scaled, secret, and destructive algorithm. And that's what this value-added model became, right? It was powerful. It was being used to fire people in an entire school system. And it's actually being used, it was at the time at least, being used in more than half of the states, usually in urban school districts. It is secret. Nobody understands it, including, by the way, most of the people in the school systems themselves. They were being made in these little tiny like think tanky places and sold to the school systems with a license saying like you'll never see this formula. So even the superintendent of schools couldn't understand the formula.
And if you think that, weapons of mass destruction are not pertinent to your life, it's not just your shopping and it's not just your teaching, but we're also talking about, and in the book you go into this, policing and incarceration. So talk about that, because that to me is where like, oh my God, the real life, I mean, it's terrible this woman lost her job. The next bad iteration of this really feels pretty awful to me.
This is a huge, huge thing. And mostly, if you read about it in the media, you'll see it touted as like scientific policing.
Right.
Right.
Like targeted.
Yes. And this, again, for me, is like an abuse of the authority of mathematics. Like we should trust math. We shouldn't trust mathematical algorithms because, again, you curate the data and you define success. So the first sort of realm of algorithms being used in the justice system are predictive policing algorithms. And they basically say, look at the sort of location of previous arrests, and then they say, let's predict the next crime based on the location of previous arrests. The difference between where crimes happen and where arrests happen is very, very large. It's like most people don't really think about this, but most crimes don't lead to arrests, especially drug crimes.
Right.
But in some places, they really do, much more often anyway. So what's happened is because of the data, the arrests are happening where we've been doing broken windows policing, where we've been sort of putting lots and lots of police in poor minority neighborhoods. And we are finding those low-level crimes because that was the point of broken windows policing and stop and frisk. That was the point of it. So the data will tell us, go back there. That's where the crimes are occurring. The thought experiment I like to do around this, which I think you'll enjoy, is what if after the crisis, cops were sent down to Wall Street to arrest all the bankers? And because, there's where the crime is. If they had done that, then the data we have would be very different. It would say, oh, go back to Wall Street. That's where the crime is. Let's go look for crime over there. It's not what we just chose to do as a society. But that sort of brings up the real point, which is that we are just as much predicting our society as we are predicting crime.
I mean, I kind of liked it more when we were talking about baseball, I got to tell you. This is definitely sobering. Is there a way to build a better algorithm to do what they're trying to do? Could you create such a algorithm for either teachers or policing that you think is a fairer way to try to do what they're trying to do?
So with teachers, I don't know how to do it, but I will tell you how I would test anything. If I were asked to build something, I wouldn't accept what I've built until it agrees closely with a qualitative assessment of teachers that we can agree on. So the whole sort of the genesis of the FAST teacher ability assessments was that, yes, we could assess teachers qualitatively, but it's very expensive and it doesn't scale. Well, my argument would be we have to make sure that whatever we come up with agrees with that qualitative assessment before we try scaling it. As far as the policing thing goes, it's really tricky because what big data models do is they propagate the past. They repeat patterns because that's what algorithms are good at. They're picking up historical patterns and repeating them. And the question we have to ask ourselves is, do we want to repeat our past policing patterns? Or do we want to really change the way we do policing? My feeling personally is we would probably want to rethink it. And if we rethink it, then the data we get out of it will look very different. Now, if we really changed policing and we kept it different, then an algorithm built on that kind of data would look different. And maybe that would be a good way to go. But I think right now, the data is so painfully biased against poor minority neighborhoods that I don't know how to fix that.
We'll get back to our interview with Cathy O'Neil in just a second. You can buy her book, Weapons of Math Destruction: How Big Data Increases Inequality and Threatens Democracy, anywhere you find your favorite books. Okay, Jill on Money. We'll be right back.
If you've missed any part of the show or want to check out a past show, go to JillOnMoney.com for more great personal finance content.
You're back. It's Jill on Money, and we are concluding our interview, our rebroadcast of an interview with Cathy O'Neil. She's the author of Weapons of Math Destruction. Sure, you're going to enjoy this, all about credit scores.
Also in the book, you talk about using algorithms and how they're incorporated with things that we encounter every day in the financial world, like your credit score, as well as maybe insurance sales. So let me just start with the credit score, because people really do get wrapped around the axle about their credit scores. And I think that, when I first entered the financial planning business, no one talked about a credit score. Like when you got a mortgage, someone talked a tiny bit about credit, but mostly you're walking into your banker and saying, here's how much money I made, here's my tax returns, what do I get?
Yeah.
So talk about the evolution of how algorithms have changed the credit system right now.
Great. I mean, and this is such a sobering story, actually. So it was actually part of the women's lib movement that they noticed, especially divorced women, had a lot of trouble getting any credit whatsoever from their local banker because, as you say, the bankers would look you up and down, ask you for papers. If all you could provide was stuff that happened when you were married, like bankers just didn't give it credit to women for that. And that was a problem. And this is sort of around the same time as the civil rights movement. So policymakers actually responded to this and said, you know what? It should not be legal to base creditworthiness on a gender, and then at the end they put in race either. It really upended the loan business for small bankers, and they were like, what? How are we going to figure out who's creditworthy? In response to this, the FICO score was born. People think of this as like an awful thing, but actually FICO scores, they were created in response to this law as a way of sort of letting banks continue with the process of loans, saying like these are by construction legal. They do not use race, they do not use gender, and you can use them to decide who to give a loan to. And of course, bankers loved it because it was much easier for them. And it allowed them to scale their loans actually much, much higher. And that's one of the reasons we've seen so many more credit cards, because FICO scores made it so much easier for everyone to think about loaning to each other. It was very sanitary. It was like sanitized the whole process.
By the way, so it made me feel a little bit better reading the book about Fair Isaac as like just as an organization, even though I think that credit scores are just overblown in terms of like what they've come to mean. But
absolutely. I would argue that the credit scores as a way of deciding who's creditworthy are actually pretty good because they're based on, let's recall, they're based on like your actual ability to pay your electricity bill.
Your history
of paying your bills, which I think everyone would agree with is a fair measure. What's wrong with it is that they're being used to decide whether you can perform at a job.
Right. Get an apartment
or even have a date. And the reason, of course, that's so bad is because if you've lost your job and then you've been unemployed for a while, your credit score is inevitably beginning to go down. So it makes it harder to get that job. You're starting to see a pattern. The people who are unlucky become more unlucky. The people who are lucky get luckier. I'm not trying to say that I should be in charge of ethics. I'm very progressive. I'm not representative, right? I'm saying we need to have an ethical conversation separate from an algorithm. And we can't just say this algorithm is inherently fair and objective. It's simply not. It is subjective, and we need to understand the subjectivity.
Tell me about insurance, because we, by the way, get a gazillion questions about insurance on the program here.
I think the easiest case to make that insurance and big data is really essentially incompatible is health insurance. We have no idea what's going on with health insurance in this country, so let me scare you.
Great. Everyone prepare to hang on.
So the underlying concept of insurance is pretty simple. We're a village. Let's just say we have a 1,000-person village, right? When people get sick, they go to the doctor and they spend their entire life savings getting well. And they're broke afterwards. So their life is ruined. And it's an awful tragedy for those people. And we keep seeing this happen. And eventually someone comes up with a smart idea. They say, let's pool our resources. Let's all, like once a month, put in an affordable amount of money into this big urn. And someone is going to get paid a little bit to protect the urn, right? And then when somebody gets sick, they can take money out of the urn to pay for their insurance.
Okay.
They pay for their doctors. Mm-hmm. And they won't end up like a defeated, broken person.
Right.
Okay. That is insurance. It's pooled risk.
Right.
The idea being put in an affordable amount of money every month instead of having an unaffordable amount of money expected of you at a specific terrible time.
Right.
Now introduce big data. What does big data do? Big data allows us to profile and segregate and silo every single person based on their risk.
Mm-hmm.
So somebody who's pretty sick or about to be sick is going to be charged way more than somebody who seems like they're not sick at all and they're not going to get sick.
Mm-hmm.
Now, obviously, there's all sorts of things that are totally unpredictable, like breaking your leg. And by the way, I should say that like those algorithms, those AI really, that's learning about our future health risks could be invaluable tools for our doctors. If our doctors see what we're at risk of and help us prevent those illnesses.
Mm-hmm.
But in the hands of insurance companies, what do? They just silo you off, say you're in a high-risk pool, you're in a low-risk pool. Oh, good news, low-risk people. And they always frame it as good news,
Yeah.
always.
Great
good
news.
Your premiums have just gone down. In the world of market competition among insurance companies, it's simple. What they're trying to do is get rid of all the sick people and lower the premiums as much as possible on the healthy people, which is to say get only really, really healthy people. And the asymptotic limit of this, as a nerd, I have to say that every
I
now
love
and then,
that word.
is insurance for people who don't need it and no insurance for people who need it. We have defeated the purpose of pooled risk if we get rid of everybody who's risky.
Okay, when we come back, we will take one more question from you. If you would like more information about Cathy O'Neil, you can buy her book, Weapons of Math Destruction, wherever you get your books. You can also check out her website. It's called orcarisk.com. We'll be right back. You're back. It's Jill on Money. And before we conclude the show, want to remind you that we are broadcasting from the Policy Genius Virtual Studios. Policy Genius is the easy way to compare and buy insurance. Just go to policygenius.com. And it's an excellent site, I must say. Okay, I think I mentioned earlier in the program that I had done a really cool meeting, a Zoom meetup for a bunch of recent graduates. And one of them wrote in, she had asked me a question during the meetup that was about investing. I gave one of my classic mantras, which is timing the market doesn't work, but time in the market works. So, because she was asking about choosing the optimal time to enter or leave the stock market. Okay, so she asks a follow-up question. In light of the pandemic's effect on various industries, do you think there are some in particular that would be interesting to keep an eye on? It's great to learn about all this stuff. Okay. Now, there's a couple things to consider. I think that the industries that are really important are going to be the ones that you are investing in inside of the index funds that I hope you're going to be buying. But more to the point, what do I think is really going to happen coming out of this is really about what kind of transformation will take place in almost every industry. We have just been given a grand experiment in working from home. We've been given a grand experiment in healthcare. I still think that healthcare is an industry that is really needs to be disrupted and should be disrupted. I think that the big players in almost every industry will emerge even stronger coming out of the pandemic. So that could be, your Amazons and your Walmarts and your Targets. And I think that the industries that have not yet been born are going to be fascinating to watch. So I don't usually pick things like that, but I think keep your eyes open. Don't be a naysayer. Be willing to embrace something that's new. Okay? Hey, thanks for writing. And thanks to all of you for listening. It is always a pleasure to talk to you. If you have any questions, feel free. Email us day or night, 7 days a week. Ask Jill at jillonmoney.com. Wash your hands. Keep your social distance. Wear your masks. We'll talk to you next week. Thanks for listening.